no succession, if there is no succession duties ordinance, there is no succession duties, and no other law stipulates that these duties be collected. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, the grant of probate or letters of administration is critical to the Inland Revenue Department for the settlement of taxes of the deceased. There must be an administrator or an executor appointed who has as one of his or her duties the settlement of the debts of the deceased. The appointed individual becomes the responsible party for the settlement of all taxes in arrears by the deceased by the stipulated period provided by the court in the grant. It would therefore be be determined by the Inland Revenue to refuse to object to the issuance of the certificates. Mr. Speaker, the repeal of the article that I speak of, 1015(2) of the Code of Civil Procedure, is expected to increase the efficiency of the process involved in obtaining a probate. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the lawyers would be very happy with this amendment because it calls for the need of a document that is no longer relevant because the document, the duties it purports to have collected, these duties no longer exist. Mr. Speaker, I beg that the Honorable House approve this amendment.
Honorable members, the question is that the Code of Civil Procedure Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. Ayes have it.
An act to amend the Code of Civil Procedure, Act Cap 243 of the Revised Laws of St. Lucia, 1957.
Did I just close the debate? Nobody's light came on, so that's okay. The member for Labra's bag was up as if he intended to go home. Or that's a member for Mikut. The Leader of Government Business and Deputy Prime Minister. Oh, we didn't go to committee. That lunch was something else. I'm blaming you, member. Clause 2.
Amendment of Article 1015.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Honorable members, I beg to report that the Code of Civil Procedure Amendment Bill went to committee without amendments. That we now report to the House that the bill was passed in committee without amendment. Now put the question. We have an amendment? Oh. As many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable members, I beg to report that the Code of Civil Procedure Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendment. Prime Minister.
I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Honorable members, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Code of Civil Procedure Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Code of Civil Procedure Amendment Act 2023.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Invest St. Lucia Amendment.
Invest St. Lucia Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 48-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order 48-2 be suspended in order to allow the Deputy Prime Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Invest St. Lucia Amendment. Mr. Speaker, this is a very simple amendment which we are requesting the Honorable House to approve. Previously, the agency's Invest St. Lucia was located within the Ministry of Commerce, Industry, etc. With the new configuration which took place after July 2021, investment was placed with tourism as well as culture, creative industries, and information. And you'll find in the realignment, they created some dislocation. And what has resulted is that with a ministry responsible for business development, which focuses a lot on the maturing and the evolution and the support needed for local businesses, you'll find you have an agency which is promoting investment, both local and foreign, but that linkage with the development of our local business sector sometimes is disjointed. Of course, previously, if it had been in the same ministry, there would have been a common permanent secretary who can provide oversight for both functions. And we're now asking for us to ensure that the investment climate, to ensure that the facilitating structures, the conducive environment is created where you have the linkage between the two. The business development that takes place within the Ministry of Commerce, Business Development, cooperatives, etc., and the investment, ministry. So therefore, we requesting that we amend the legislation to allow, not for the Ministry of Commerce as is stated here, we would be seeking an amendment during the committee stage to allow for the ministry with responsibility for business development. So the permanent secretary of the Ministry for Business Development would be a member of the board of Invest St. Lucia, and therefore provide that cooperation, collaboration, coordination between the local business environment, the local business development, and of course, we promoting and seeking both foreign and local investors in the country. And I believe if we do so, it would really create that seamless relationship that we seek and that we want to promote. So as it is now, you'll find that we have to be reaching out to the Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry responsible for business development and to relate to them and get information from them, and then local businesses reach out to them and then have to reach out to Invest St. Lucia separately. And we felt that there ought to be a slight adjustment, and this amendment reflects that slight adjustment that we're asking for. But the primary reason why we're doing it, Mr. Speaker, is because we want to create that investment climate in the country. We want businesses to feel that when they do come to the country to invest, that there is a one-stop shop, Mr. Speaker, and it would allow us to provide the kind of support that we think is necessary, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish to propose to honorable members that they support the proposed amendment, Mr. Speaker. So, I recommend to my colleagues, I'm sure the member for Soufrière, for Sejac, will speak about it, since it would be her ministry that I was referring to ensure that we strengthen the relationship between the two, and any other member, of course, that wishes to speak on the amendment.
Honorable members, the question is that the Invest St. Lucia Amendment Act be read a second time. Member for Suzel Saltivas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I chose to speak before the member for Soufrière because hopefully she would clarify the question. I mean, this is a straightforward bill, no political debate here as far as I'm concerned. But if memory serves me well, and I'm not sure if the amendment should be for the addition of the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Commerce or for an amendment of the quantum of the board. Because if I recall, the permanent secretary, the legislation was amended, the Invest St. Lucia Amendment Act was amended to have the permanent secretary as a member of the board of Invest. Yes, it was. That's right. No. The permanent secretary of the Ministry of Commerce. That was the. Are you certain? For Invest. Okay. Well, you're correct. But I guess because it was under one roof, that's the confusion. Okay. So fine. So that being clarified, I rest. Yes.
The member for Soufrière for Sejac.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today, as the Minister responsible for Commerce, Business Development, Manufacturing, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs, I rise in support of the Invest St. Lucia Amendment Bill, now on the floor of this august body. Mr. Speaker, it is instructive that we are passing this amendment during Business Month. And as the member for Castries South just indicated, Mr. Speaker, the overall objective of this amendment is to improve the efficiency of doing business in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Commerce works closely with Invest St. Lucia and share similar mandates in pursuit of private sector development and growth. Invest St. Lucia has a function to stimulate, facilitate, and promote investment opportunities for foreign or local investors in St. Lucia, while the Ministry of Commerce has the responsibility for creating and sustaining an enabling environment for trade and investment. Mr. Speaker, neither trade nor investment occurs in a vacuum, and it is a prerequisite for us to have a vibrant commercial and industrial ecosystem in which productivity, innovation, and diversity can coexist, along with policy, regulations, transparency, and accountability. This fine balance, Mr. Speaker, is what enables businesses and entrepreneurs to carve out a substantial niche market and opportunity. Each entity and each institution, whether it is a micro, medium, large, or whatever trade, whether it's in trade or services, Mr. Speaker, it's important in making St. Lucia a competitive and attractive destination for foreign direct investment and for doing business. Mr. Speaker, I would like to highlight a few activities and initiatives by the Ministry of Commerce and business development in particular, in support of private sector growth and development and overall enhancement of the business climate in St. Lucia. And this month, the ministry is observing Business Month under the theme Sustaining Trade in the Digital Age, Mr. Speaker. And today I want to highlight a few things. The ministry, with the support of the OAS, has provided 50 MSMEs across St. Lucia with point-of-sale machines and a one-year paid service subscription through our partners, Bank of St. Lucia, including the vendors. And we had the first launch of this initiative in Soufrière about 2 weeks ago, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have discussed in this House the whole issue of our MSME, and we have about 120 disbursements so far, with over $2 million being disbursed. Mr. Speaker, these initiatives form part of a wider project entitled St. Lucia's Digital Enhancement Program, and there we get support from our friends from the Republic of China, Taiwan. At a recently held St. Lucia Taiwan Partnership Trade Show, Mr. Speaker, visitors were left in awe of the wide range of technology-based businesses that already exist here in St. Lucia. From 3D holograms to robotics, virtual reality, and other emerging technologies. I think it's fair to say, Mr. Speaker, that St. Lucia received a glimpse of what the world has to offer and what our very own St. Lucians can bring to the fore. Mr. Speaker, the path forward for us, therefore, is obvious. In order to remain relevant in this new investment and business age, digital transformation is absolutely necessary. And Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Commerce looks forward to continue working with Invest St. Lucia and our private partners in advancing towards this path, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I felt it was important for me to outline some of the things that we've done. Because, Mr. Speaker, about 3 weeks ago, the Honorable Member for Choiseul Saltbus, in one of the, what you call, open town halls, I would consider made a very dishonorable act, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. And at that time, the Honorable Member was discussing the whole issue of the shortage of rice in St. Lucia. And the Honorable Member made a statement to the effect that there's a shortage of rice either because the ministry has an incompetent minister or that the government of St. Lucia does not have the money to do so.
Speaker.
Now, Mr. Speaker, I am...
Member for Choiseul Saltbus. Member for Soufrière is standing on a point of order.
Speaker, on a point of order, the member is misleading the House. The member indicated that at a town hall meeting, she made reference that I alluded to the Minister of Commerce being incompetent. I never uttered these words, Mr. Speaker, and I think Madam from Soufrière
What did you imply?
I never uttered these words.
You want me to...
I never uttered the words.
What
May have been uttered by somebody else, but I never uttered the words that the Minister of Commerce was incompetent. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if you would allow me, I could indicate exactly what, yes. I indicated that during my time as the Minister of Commerce Okay, I received a report monthly indicating, and I give various areas in which the PS would report to me in terms of what was at the warehouse, in terms of the quantity, how much sales we had for a particular period, how long we expected the quantity that was left in the warehouse to continue, what shipment was en route to St. Lucia, where the shipment was coming from. These were my words, but I have never referred to the minister, and I think the minister, if she was receiving information secondhand, should know better because of how I have always spoken to her, about her in this house in particular. Thank you.
The member for Soufrière Forcejac, the member for Suzel Saltibus, has indicated he never uttered these words.
Mr. Speaker,
what's your response?
The member implied that either the minister is incompetent or that the government has no money.
Or that the government had?
No monies, no funds.
So you stand by your statement?
I stand by my statement. And I'm saying, I raised it here, and the member, the honorable member is correct in terms of saying that he ought not to, maybe what he should have said is he ought not to imply what he implied. He ought, and he is aware because the honorable member was also a minister in the Ministry of Commerce.
The member for Suzel has another point of order to raise on.
Mr. Speaker, I would like, if you would allow, at the next sitting of this House, I could provide a recording to indicate that I have never referred to the minister as being incompetent.
Fair enough.
And if you would allow that.
Fair enough. Proceed, member for
Thank you,
Soufrière.
Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the issue, and I'm raising this because I've sat here last week Tuesday and today, and what I'm seeing very clearly is an issue of misinformation and disinformation. Now, when we took an oath of office to serve in this honorable House, we took an oath to serve the people of St. Lucia. Now, the people at the Ministry of Commerce, the staff at the Ministry of Commerce, are working under intense pressure, knowing that we have to ensure that there is basic commodities of rice, flour, and sugar on this island. And the honorable member, as he just informed, being a former minister, is aware of the processes. So the statement that you made, and I really want you to bring the entire statement and play it in this honorable House. Because what you have done is to demoralize the staff at the Ministry of Commerce, especially at the warehouse department. The issue of misinformation and disinformation is something that we have to stop doing. This place is too small for it.
That's right.
It is too small for it. So, Mr. Speaker, what are some of the things that we're doing? I have raised some of the things that we're doing. But that this particular adjustment before us is important, it is necessary. In collaboration with Invest St. Lucia, the Ministry of Commerce continues to pursue the development of robust policies in support of business process outsourcing. And that's an important area for us, Mr. Speaker. We would call it call centers in our own local parlance. This sector has grown very important to the local economy. It requires as well, it provides significant employment for our sector. And I am pleased to report, especially for our youth, that the BDO sector is one that we are working on policies to ensure that we create employment. Mr. Speaker, in collaboration with Invest St. Lucia, the Ministry of Commerce, as well as other stakeholders, are working on creating a business incubator sector. And that's important for us, Mr. Speaker, especially for our small businesses, in support of our MSME agro-processors and manufacturers in the move towards industrialization, formalization, and market penetration. Mr. Speaker, given my ministry's mandate to nurture that entrepreneurial spirit, to facilitate private sector growth and development, and ensure there is an enabling environment for trade and investment, and given the fruitful collaboration with Invest St. Lucia, today I stand here fully supporting this adjustment. Mr. Speaker, only yesterday we had the opportunity to have a church service and to honor some 11 businesses that have served for more than 50 years in this country at the Lady of Fatima Church in La Claire. And for me, Mr. Speaker, it was a moment when the Ministry of Commerce, the government of St. Lucia, and the business community came together in thanking God and thanking each other for serving St. Lucians. Mr. Speaker, I stand here in full support of this adjustment, and I give a commitment to the business community that we at the Ministry of Commerce and Invest St. Lucia and the government of St. Lucia will do all in our power to improve the business climate in St. Lucia and by extension grow the economy of St. Lucia. I thank you.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member from Mico South is not present, and I would have loved him to be present to have, because this morning you would recall that he made statements as it relates to GPH, the Global Ports Holding, and I had indicated to him then that when I spoke in the afternoon, I would have provided some clarity on some of the issues that he had raised. And it's important, Mr. Speaker, that I correct some of the points that he made this morning, because you would notice the attempt that we're making through the amendment proposed. And we spoke of creating an investment climate in the country where we can spur business development. We spoke of creating the linkages between the ministry responsible for business development and for investment. And all of that is about creating an investment climate that's conducive to the economic growth that we need for the national development process in St. Lucia. And I think it is really important that St. Lucia focuses on the difference between the opposition and how they operate and this government. And a member earlier today spoke of we doing our work in a focused manner, deliberate, knowing exactly what it is we need to do to take St. Lucia forward. And you compare that with what's happening with the opposition. There is nothing about the actions of the opposition that gives you the impression that they are concerned about creating an environment in this country that is conducive for national development. When you hear some of the comments emanating from the opposition, they speak of burning down the country. They speak of, blocking roads. And you even heard the member speak of the big match they want to have next week. Everything that one would expect a opposition that is not committed and sincere about national development and about taking the country forward. And it became really disturbing, Mr. Speaker, when you listen to the attack that has been going on against GPH, if you wanted any more evidence that the opposition has no interest in ensuring that St. Lucia progresses, and I think the Prime Minister, the member for Castries, is described it as they willing to destroy everything in the hope that they can be re-elected and they would build it back, Mr. Speaker. Why would you launch an attack against GPH? Why? Especially given the fact that when we came into office in July 2021, the opposition, when in government, was negotiating with GPH. In fact, let us go back a few years. This same leader of the opposition, had signed an agreement with Royal Caribbean in 2008 for the redevelopment of Port Castries in 2008. Again, another agreement was signed after he became Prime Minister in 2016. So there had been a determined effort on his part to pursue the redevelopment of Castries for cruise services and to do so with Royal Caribbean. We've learned against his coming into government in 2021 that there was discussion ongoing with Royal Caribbean, Carnival Corporation, and DSH about building a cruise ship terminal in the El Pirata area together with about 9 or 10 islands that he wanted to build. So he had been on train with DSH talking about cruise terminal with private enterprises. Of course, the cruise lines would inform us that they never took the Vieux-Fort project seriously because they could not see how it was feasible to do so. They have an interest in Vieux-Fort and continue to talk to us about that interest. But why would you be critical of GPH? It's a question I've asked myself over and over again. So let's go back to July 2021. There had been discussions with GPH. And you wonder, Mr. Speaker, if the member from Mico South, and I don't know whether I should add the member for Strozel Saltibus as part of it, because he was responsible for investment. They seem to have forgotten that the member for Castries North, who is part of our government, was part of the discussions. So much so that the member for Castries North, who is now a member of our government, had traveled with the leader of the opposition. He knows the discussions that took place. He was the minister responsible for ports. So how can you have had somebody with you in the discussions, who is now a member in this present government, and pretend that GPH is so bad and that it is the most unworthy thing to happen, when you were holding discussions with them? In fact, I can tell you what has happened is that when we came into government in July 2021, having reviewed what was on the table, we thought it was not good enough. Think about that. It was not good enough. And the story is well known that the member from Soufrière in particular impressed on the Prime Minister and asked that Soufrière be included in any development of any port for cruise services. And to show you how the opposition operates, she said she had a secret meeting with them and convinced them that they must include Soufrière. They said, oh, it was a secret deal that was being done to spin it. But the member from Soufrière ensured that Soufrière was part of the agreement. So why are they afraid of the GPH arrangement? Why? Is it because they believe if it comes through, and it will come through, it means the death of Soufrière to them? Is that what it is? Yeah. I mean, that Soufrière will no longer ever be available to them as a seat? Never. Is it that is what they are afraid of? So listen to the member from Mico South. First of all, he is boasting everywhere that the government sold the port. Now, seriously? That the government sold the port? And to actually hear members of the party, and I cannot say I've ever heard a member from Strozel Saltibus repeat it, but I'm sure he'll know better, to actually say that they've sold the port. I can inform this honorable chamber that the government has not sold the port and will never sell the port. What has happened, investment, I'm closing comments. What has happened, no, I was making the point I had to respond to comments made by the member from Mico South this morning about GPH. You want to rise on a point?
Clarification.
Clarification?
The backlog.
Member for Swazel, I notice you are asking the Deputy Prime Minister for permission in my house. Just kidding.
You see, Mr. Speaker, there's some relationships that go beyond the politics, and I'm always happy when, my friend and colleague, I can say it anyway, because there are things that are a lot deeper than actually, I was not sure what we were discussing, so he had to give me clarification. But the whole issue of the GPH deal, Mr. Speaker, and I'm seeking some clarification, is that, and there's a question that has been asked, and is the member for Soufrière, one of the things she said when she stood up is she's been very concerned the amount of disinformation and misinformation that has been going on recently. And very recently I was invited to a forum at Sandals discussing that very same thing. And one of the points that stuck with me was one of the presenters said, lack of information is just as detrimental as misinformation and disinformation. And I think that is the whole issue with GPH, because there's not been anything forthcoming, and that's the concern. And questions that have been asked is, has there been due diligence? Okay, has there been due diligence? When you go on the GPH site, which is public, there are a number of questions. When you analyze the last set of balance sheets, number of concerns. So people have a right to ask these things. Now, I'm hearing you for the first time. You may have spoken about it before, trying to clarify certain things. But I'm saying there should be a broader transparency with regards to that, because that's significant. So I just wanted to say that, because I think the GPH thing is significant enough for us to know as St. Lucians. The question, and I've said it, that's one thing I've said before in reference to the community that I'm from, Choiseul, because we said that Vieux-Fort is going to be locked up from any development. Is that part of the deal? So these are questions we've asked and we do not know. We have a right to ask of it. So we can't get vexed, Not convenient, member for Denrinoff, because you ask questions when you're in opposition too. Okay? So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for your leave.
Before you proceed, Deputy Prime Minister, member for Swazel, every member before taking his oath or her oath is presented with the standing orders. The standing orders make provision for any member to ask of any minister, either written or orally, any question to be answered in Parliament. I don't know that the opposition has taken advantage of that. So to blame the minister for not giving information is equally to say that you have not requested what is your duty under the standing orders and in this House. Please proceed, Deputy Prime Minister.
You might put off your mic. Bradley.
I mean, honorable member, it is...
You'll give us the agreement?
Kind of strange. Your questions are not necessarily unfounded. And like the member from Denrinoff has pointed out, it's a little unusual to hear you say what you're saying, because
it's not unusual. That's convenient.
No, when I say unusual, we've been generous to him, because we came into this house. You would recall the DSH debate. The questions that we had asked, the Don Lockerbie agreements, the Carbot agreement, the Range agreements, the Dolphin Park agreement, and I can go on and on.
Remind him what did
and even if I want to be generous to you, I would say you fully appreciate the fact that sometimes you sign commercial agreements, and governments do not just go and make public the copies of commercial agreements. I'm giving you a way out why y'all did not do it. Although in your case it was a little different, because what y'all did was deny there was ever DSH agreement.
And when we came
deny, and we were the ones who actually made it public. And we tried to make it a document at this house, and we were told we cannot because this is a false document. But the point is, there are questions about DSH, and sure, we have to answer it as a government. Some of those very same questions I have answered, the Prime Minister has answered. GPH themselves have had public consultations. They have answered those questions. They have answered them. They've had sessions with the chamber, they have had sessions with vendors, they have had sessions in Soufrière, multiple public discussions in Soufrière. They've had in Banan. So therefore, there are persons on your side who are deliberately and maliciously trying to create an impression in the minds of St. Lucians that this is so wrong. I have no difficulty with you asking questions which you believe in the discourse would not have been answered by the government side. That's fine. That's fine. But let's not pretend as if any agreement we sign on in this government, it has to be made public and everybody to see it. You know that's not how commercial negotiations and agreements are structured. You know that. But yes, government does have a responsibility to share information with the citizenry. We accept that. And when questions are asked, we answer them. And that's why I'm answering the question that government did not sell the port. And everybody on your side knows that government did not sell the port because governments do not sell ports. At least I don't know governments that sell ports. Listen to the leader of the opposition, your leader, when he explains why he believed the port was sold. If you lease for 40 years, then that's as good as selling it. Is that the quality of his thinking and his understanding of issues? Is that what it is? So he knows we did not sell the port. And then he says for 40 years. And he does some maths this morning. I mean, it is almost unbelievable. He claims that we had 1 million cruise passengers, 1 million cruise passengers in 2019. I can make it, it's already a document at the House. The Social and Economic Review of 2019, page 31, will say we had 786,000 visitors, the highest to date, and we've not passed that since 2019. 786,000. The leader of opposition stands there and he's challenged, but he still says that the data is there and we had 1 million passengers. So that's fine, 1 million passengers. He then says in his calculation, because he's saying all over that SLASMA is giving up 400 million US over 40 years of the agreement. Can I just also inform you that it is a 30-year lease. It makes provisions for negotiations on an extension with the same company or any other company that we may wish to have any new agreement if we so desire. But let's assume, like he said, 40 years. So he says 40 years by 1 million, and then he calculates that the head tax is $10 US. Now that's the deceit of the man, or the member, if I can say so, Mr. Speaker. He's not there. 10 US a head. He knows, because he's been part of the tourism infrastructure for a long time, that we have never had an increase of head tax in the history of St. Lucia. Never. Never. The last attempt was by Dr. Kenny Anthony administration together with the present Prime Minister, and we all know what happened to it. We tried to do it together as an OECS, a couple of countries pulled away, changed their mind, and then we ended up in the same situation. We've never had an increase. So the head tax is still $650, $150 goes to solid waste management, $250 goes to SLASPA, and $250 goes to government. He then says this morning that the cruise ships had agreed with him to increase it to $10. That's why he's using $10. And the question must be asked, if you were Prime Minister and the cruise ships agreed to increase the head tax to $10, why didn't you accept that and increase it? Why did you keep it at what it was? He said so this morning. He said before he left, the cruise ships had already agreed to increase the head tax to $10. But he as Prime Minister did nothing about it. What does that tell you? Are you in cohorts with the cruise ships? We've never had a head tax increase, and the cruise ship said they're willing. Imagine the cruise ship saying they're willing to increase it to $10, and he's not doing it. That's what he implies this morning. So he multiplies 1 million, which has never happened, and will probably take a few years to happen. He multiplies it by 40 years, but there is no 40-year agreement, and he multiplies it by $10 a head, knowing that it is not $10 a head. And then he comes up with 400 million US, and he's all over the Caribbean. He's all over the New Spain and all the other Sky and all the others, saying all town halls together with you that the government is giving up 400 million US. But why the deceit?
By association.
Why the deceit? Why? I can say to you that part of the GPH deal is paying off the 20 million US dollar loan of SLASPER. 20 million US dollar loan of SLASPER. At least 20 million will be spent on the redevelopment of Port Castries. What would that include? It would include the redevelopment of Bannans Bay and the construction of a fisherman's village that will include restaurants and other retail outlets and an improved facility for the fishermen. It will include a revamping of the La Plage Carénage. It will include the breaking down of the customs building and the rationalization of that area for parking and for traffic management to prevent the traffic backup that we have. It will include the redevelopment of the vendors arcade and design in a way where all the visitors who come on the ships will have to go through the vendors arcade to be able to access their transport. It would include building two finger pairs to allow for tenders from Point Seraphine to the vendors arcade so we can get more traffic into the vendors arcade. It would also include a development of a boardwalk on the waterfront to elevate and enhance the experience of visitors who walk down the waterfront to enter into Port Castries, into the city of Castries. It will also include the dredging of Point Seraphine to allow for the Oasis class vessels, which are the largest vessels presently to enter into Port Castries. And of course, a minimum of 25 million US dollars will be spent on the redevelopment of the Soufrière waterfront. At a minimum, there's an investment of about 65 million US dollars that will be put in by GPH, in exchange for which they will be allowed to manage cruise services at Port Castries. Cruise services. They'll have no involvement in ferry operations or cargo operations. And as the member from Castries East had pointed out on Tuesday, no more than 5% of the revenue of SLASPER comes from cruise services. So GPH is providing much needed investment in enhancing and elevating the visitor experience for cruise passengers. Why do we have to go down that road? Primarily because the last government, your government, of which you were part of, has debt-ridden SLASPER. At a time when we decided to have gone with a PPP for the redevelopment of the Uranora International Airport, the government decided instead to burden SLASPER with a loan of 175 million US dollars. SLASPER doesn't have the capacity and the space right now to get the kinds of monies necessary to upgrade the offering in Port Castries. So we notice GPH investing heavily in the Bahamas, enhancing the cruise arrival experience. GPH in Antigua just completed a modern facility, enhancing the experience. GPH is in Puerto Rico, enhancing the experience, and are in discussions with other Caribbean islands to do the same. What do we do? What do we do? So the engagement of GPH, which builds on what his government did, your government did. When we came in, we thought it was not good enough what was on the table. And he forgot that alongside him in the discussion was a member from Castries North, who's now a part of this government. So he denies GPH and says all kinds of things about GPH, but the member from Castries North was there. What kind of hypocrisy is this? And he wants to come here this morning and pretend that he knows so much about how to manage the economy and we're such a disaster. You'd never believe he was in government for 5 years and he was Minister of Finance for 5 years. He has all the answers for all the problems. And you really wonder why he lost the elections. So we believe the deal with GPH is a good deal. We believe St. Lucia needs it. We believe it will certainly enhance the cruise passenger experience in St. Lucia. And all the talk about selling the port and 400 million US is really malicious. And of course the attack on St. Lucians who have been employed by GPH. And this one really baffles me. It really baffles me. Why would you be decrying a St. Lucian professional who has been given the regional job to manage GPH investments? Why? And to claim that there is nepotism and there's a connection between the bank, because the bank gave some of the financing of GPH came from a local bank. And you wonder, is it new? And you are a banker? Is it new that investors get part of their financing from local banks? Is that unusual? But compared with what he did, now GPH going to a local bank is an entirely private transaction. The government is not involved in that. But remember what happened with a development in the north, where the NIC was prepared to buy lands for purposes to suit St. Lucians and for St. Lucians to own it. What did he do? He encouraged the NIC not to buy the land, but to give it to a developer who for years had been trying to raise the money to buy it. Now think about that. How can he conceive of doing this, but want to decry a private company from getting some of their financing from a local bank, which is normal and usual in the conduct of business? And when St. Lucians expressed their dissatisfaction with the fact that workers' pension funds were used by a foreign interest, do you know what they did? You were probably still there at the bank. I'm not sure. They went to a local bank to get the money to pay off the NIC loan. He said nothing. He was part of it. At least he was Minister of Finance and Prime Minister. But he's announcing to the world that GPH is doing something so wrong and wants to agitate St. Lucia and tell them to get vexed, get angry against GPH. But why? Is it the fear of what can happen in Soufrière? Is it just ranking maliciousness? But it's consistent with his behavior. It's consistent with his behavior, because that same leader of the opposition would announce to the world that DSH is preparing to sue the government of St. Lucia for non-delivery on the DSH contract. And that one really struck me, because we came into government in July 2021, and I'm going to be careful how I speak about DSH, because as you know, we are aware that they record everything we say for obvious reasons. We took a very clear principled position when in opposition, that we believe the terms and conditions were not in the best interest of St. Lucia, and we were opposed to them. We outlined the exact clauses we had a problem with, and we said it should be renegotiated. That was our position. That was our position. The Prime Minister signed an agreement together with you within a month of being elected in 2016. The then Prime Minister, within a month, signed it. But let's put that aside. When we came back into government in July 21, we repeated our exact position to DSH, that we wanted an opportunity for us to renegotiate aspects of the deal because we felt it was not in our best interest. I won't tell you what was said to the Prime Minister by DSH about the government that you served in. Suffice it to say, we continued talking to DSH about what we thought was unacceptable, and they expressed their views to us. And yes, they did serve an intent or notice to us for the possibility of arbitration and the issues about that. But they never made it public. We never made it public. We continued to try to resolve our issues. It never became public. Why would the leader of opposition in St. Lucia, 2 weeks after he had a dance at the DSH horse facility, announce to the world that DSH was going to sue the government of St. Lucia? Why did he do it? Maybe you can ask him. Why? Is it to desecrate St. Lucia? Is it to destroy the reputation of St. Lucia as an investment destination? Why did he do it? DSH never even did it. We didn't say anything because we still believe we can talk and we can resolve the differences. It's because he wants to destroy what has been done to move St. Lucia forward. It is because he wants to destroy this very investment climate that we spoke about. And when someone would say that we must vote St. Lucian, meaning vote people that care about St. Lucia, people that are committed to St. Lucia, he takes offense and your party takes offense. And a lot of noise is being made because you all feel offended that somebody said what you need in this country are people who are committed to the ideals of this country and prepared to work for this country and care about this country and care about the region and its institutions. You should not take any offense when that is said, because the behavior I've just stated there of your leader demonstrates somebody who has no liking for St. Lucia. Doesn't. Shouldn't feel offended. And shouldn't make noise about anybody saying that. After all, he said clearly he's a product of Canada. So he said to us he was born in Martinique under certain circumstances. He was an American citizen and he's a product of Canada. And then he said,
Puerto Rico.
And Puerto Rico? No, I didn't hear Puerto Rico. And then he says he's now committed to St. Lucia. So you lose elections now, so you're now going to be committed to St. Lucia. So there's a fundamental issue with the leader of the opposition and his commitment, his connection, his connectivity to St. Lucia. And you know, he stands up there on Tuesday and he speaks about tourism arrival. The leader, the Prime Minister, the member for Castries East, spoke about tourism and he spoke of the reports and the contribution tourism is making to this country. And he's almost annoyed at the Prime Minister because, and he's predicting there's going to be gloom and doom for tourism in St. Lucia. And wait and see what's going to happen. And we said to him, the numbers show that we are actually doing better than we did last year. And what did he say to me? He hoped the table I distributed, I can read it. Well, I think I can read it. At least I know every member in here can put on the table their qualifications and where they studied and which school they went to. Maybe someday you should ask your leader to show which university or which school he went to. Might be most interesting. But let's move on. Look at the table and what does it say about our tourism performance? What does it say? Is this doom and gloom? That the tourism industry is about to collapse in St. Lucia? Is that what it says? But he's not here this afternoon, and for good reason. So, Mr. Speaker, we really believe that the creation of an investment climate is critical for our national development. We believe we must build the institutions, build the structures that can work together, and that can create that enabling environment where investors want to come to the country. We believe that we do have political differences and we believe that we will not agree on anything. But we have always been reminded by our Prime Minister, especially when we were in opposition, that we must keep our eyes on the prize. And the prize is always the well-being and welfare of St. Lucia. So whatever we do, we must always make sure we do not destroy that, because we might never be able to take it to where it has to go. So we'll disagree, but we'll never behave the way he does. And what he has done and what he continues to do to destroy the reputation of St. Lucia is totally unacceptable. So you ask the questions, and they're fair. You can ask those questions. But the context in which you're asking them, it is really unacceptable. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask that members approve, and we move to committee stage. Thank you.
Honorable members, the question is that the Invest St. Lucia Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Invest St. Lucia Act, Cap 15.24.
Clause 2.
Amendment of Section 4.
Two changes, Mr. Chairman. 2A, can we change it to 9 members? And 2D, the permanent secretary in the ministry responsible for business development.
Honorable members, the proposal is that Section 2A be amended by substituting the words not more than 8 to not more than 9. And Section 2D, remove the word commerce and replace it with the words business development. Clause 2 as amended stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Aye. Honorable members, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, I beg to report that the Invest St. Lucia Amendment Bill went through committee stage with amendments to Clause 2. Leader of Government Business.
I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and pass.
Honorable members, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Invest St. Lucia Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Invest St. Lucia Amendment Act 2023.
Minister for Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology, and Vocational Training.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Climate Change.
Climate change.
That's good. Climate change.
If that's
Mr. Speaker,
a precursor to what is expected.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be presented, that the bill goes through the remaining stages at the next or subsequent sitting of the House.
Minister for External Affairs, International Trade, Civil Aviation.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Civil Aviation Amendment.
Civil Aviation Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order number 48-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order 48-2 be suspended in order to allow the Minister for Civil Aviation to proceed with the remaining stages of this bill at this sitting. And now put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Leave is granted.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Civil Aviation Amendment. Mr. Speaker, the bill for consideration of Parliament is the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill. The bill amends the Civil Aviation Act, Cap 8.07. In 2020, Mr. Speaker, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration assessed the Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority, ECA, to be non-compliant with specific international safety standards, which resulted in ECA being downgraded to Category 2. This rating meant that the respective downgrade to Category 2 is as a result of the lack of proper procedures in place or how you seek to update the regulations in a timely fashion. This rating meant that the respective laws or regulations lack the requirements to supervise air carriers in accordance with minimum international standard. It also meant that as a civil aviation authority, ECA needed more technical expertise, trained personnel, improvement in the record keeping, and on its inspection procedures, as well as the resolution of safety concerns. On May 30th, 2022, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, convened a special meeting of the Attorneys General of the OECS countries, specifically ECA member states, to finalize a bill to address the concerns that brought about the downgrading of ECA. The bill was initially approved by 4 ECA member states, with further amendments being proposed. A final draft of the bill was circulated to the Attorneys General of the ECA member states for comments. The proposed amendments to the Act considers the recommendations of the International Civil Aviation Organization post the downgrade of ECA status. In principle, the recommendation suggested that the Act should reflect a rule-making process established on a sound procedure for managing the civil aviation sector in the ECA member states. Therefore, enacting the bill is necessary to give legal effect to the recommendations proposed by the International Civil Aviation Organization for the administration of ECA. New definitions are included in the Act, Mr. Speaker, and in accordance with the ICAO recommendations, the Act is amended to provide that in some cases, the functions of the minister are subject to the Director General's power to issue directives and make regulations on matters related to the management of civil aviation. The amendment also provides that the minister responsible for civil aviation may, in the discharge of his or her function cooperate with public officers on matters related to health. In keeping with the recommendations on safety standards, Mr. Speaker, the Act is amended to establish and maintain aerodrome facilities, aerodrome meaning airport facilities, that promotes the safety and security of air navigation and to prevent the use of adjacent lands to an airport to be used in a manner that is incompatible with the safety and security of an airport. The Act is also amended to give the Director General the power to regulate civil aviation safety and security, issue directives, and determine the form of the directives. In the exercise of that power, the Director General is required to act independently and without influence. In relation to the investigation of accidents, Mr. Speaker, the Act is amended to grant the Minister the power to appoint an investigator or to delegate the investigation of an accident to another state or regional investigation organization. According to the amendment, the investigator is granted unrestricted access to and control over the scene of an accident and the authority to conduct a detailed investigation of the evidence, including the interview of a witness. The Act is also amended to restrict access to records relating to an aviation occurrence under investigation that are disclosed to the public. Mr. Speaker, the Act is amended to transfer the power to prescribe the form of a notice of suspension or the cancellation of an aviation document from the Minister to the Director General. In relation to the safety of civil aviation, Mr. Speaker, the Act is amended to provide for the offense of willingly committing or attempting to commit an unlawful act which jeopardizes the protection of civil aviation. The Act is further amended to grant to an inspector the power to oversee compliance with and the enforcement of the Act. To ensure oversight, an inspector has access to work areas, ramps, workshops, cargo handling areas, personal files and manuals. In addition, the inspector is empowered to interview relevant persons and to seize property for the purpose of testing. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the Director General, instead of the Minister, has the power to make regulations on aspects regarding the safety and security of civil aviation. The authority granted to the Director General under the regulations includes imposing penalties for the breach of the regulations and establishing a system for mandatory or voluntary reporting of aviation occurrences. In view of the transfer of power to the Director General, the amendment to the Act allows the Minister to prescribe offenses for the breach of the regulations. The Act is also amended, Mr. Speaker, to expand the powers of the Minister to make regulations on matters related to liability insurance required by owners or operators of an aircraft, fees payable, the issuance and administration of air service licenses and exemptions. The bill also removes Section 54, exemptions by regulation, and 55, exemptions in public interest of the Act, as the transition matters are dealt with by this amendment. Mr. Speaker, the House of Assembly is invited to consider the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill and to enact the bill so that the Act may be amended accordingly.
Honourable members, the question is that the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill be read a second time. Seeing there is no debate, would you still like to say something?
Mr. Speaker, I certainly prognosticated that this amendment would not have provoked members of this honorable House to make any significant comment. I think it's harmonized legislation throughout the OECS, and St. Lucia is the last remaining state to pass the amendment to the bill, and it is for this exact reason why the powers are given to the Director General of ECHA, so that he can update the legislation so we are all part and parcel of that upgrade to prevent situations like this. Because sometimes St. Vincent may pass it, Dominica, but St. Lucia has not yet done it, then Grenada. So it always delay the implementation of regulations in a timely fashion. So I think members of this House acted wisely and courageously on this particular occasion. I see the member for Choiseul Saltibus in the holding pattern. Yes, begging for landing instructions. So since it's not my house, I pass you on to the Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Civil Aviation Act, Cap 8.07.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 4.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 6.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 7.
Member for Choiseul.
The clarification was the use of the word adjacent in its broad sense, or adjacent as is, because adjacent could be interpreted in various forms. So I just thought...
adjacent to the airport?
Adjacent to the airport, maybe
yes.
Next to, but we don't want it to be...
Okay, but basically, at an airport, member, you would find conical surfaces and vertical surfaces that you protect for the safe operation of aeroplanes. So, for example, coming into land, you need the approach path to be clear of all obstacles, except those that are essential for safe navigation of the aeroplane. So, for example, by Kokodan, you would see a simple lighting system, and the lights are erected on very flimsy, bases, so that in the event an aeroplane may just touch those lights, it would snap without causing any damage to the aeroplane. When an aircraft is taken off, it requires what is called a clearway, free of all obstacles when the aircraft is actually taken off before it turns right or left. So you have legal separation standards. So obviously a 1967 report done by the Canadians, when they were considering the master plan for Hiwanora International Airport to expand it to accommodate wide-body aeroplanes, they did a study, did a master plan that asked the government to acquire all lands around the airport, the Kokodan lands, the lands by the DSH, adjacent to the DSH area there, the entire, what they call the Kakabeth, that concrete strip, should all be part and parcel of the airport property to ensure that you protect the safety of the aeroplanes. And now you have, and that was even before they had the Airbus 380, which is a bigger aeroplane, that you need to upgrade your aerodrome to accommodate a new category of aeroplane. So you have lengthened runways, and where you would have to lengthen the runways is westward. It means that you cannot afford to have obstacles there. Well, let's buy Il Pirat and all of those areas. You know, as far as practicable, all the lands in the immediate vicinity of the airport should be utilized for future airport expansion.
I have to tell you, I now believe I can fly. Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 7.
Amendment of Section 10.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Clause 8.
Amendment of Section 11.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill. Clause 9.
Amendment of Section 13.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill. Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 31.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill. Clause 11.
Amendment of Section 32.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill. Clause 12.
Amendment of Section 33.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill. Clause 13.
Amendment of Section 38.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill. Clause 14.
Amendment of Section 40.
Clause 14 stands part of the bill. Clause 15.
Substitution of Section 46.
Clause 15 stands part of the bill. Clause 16.
Amendment of Section 49.
Clause 16 stands part of the bill. Clause 17.
Amendment of Section 50.
Clause 17 stands part of the bill. Clause 18.
Amendment of Section 51.
Clause 18 stands part of the bill. Clause 19.
Amendment of Section 52.
Clause 19 stands part of the bill. Clause 20.
Amendment of Section 53.
Clause 20 stands part of the bill. Clause 21.
Repeal of Section 54.
Clause 21 stands part of the bill. Clause 22.
Repeal of Section 55.
Clause 22 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Honorable members, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of that opinion, as contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, I beg to report that the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Minister for Civil Aviation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Honorable member, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Civil Aviation Bill, Amendment Bill, be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Civil Aviation Amendment Act 2023.
Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Regulated Substances.
Regulated substances.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order number 48-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order 48-2 be suspended in order to allow the Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put a question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Regulated Substances. Mr. Speaker, in September, I rose in this Honorable House to provide an update on the cannabis regime being developed for St. Lucia. At that time, Mr. Speaker, I indicated to this Honorable House that I would be coming in a few weeks to this August chamber to present legislation geared at creating a regulatory body which shall have responsibility for cannabis and other regimes. Mr. Speaker, today I rise as promised to present to this Honorable House the Regulated Substances Bill. The purpose of the bill, Mr. Speaker, is to establish the Regulated Substances Authority, Regulated Substances Tribunal, Regulated Substances Fund, to provide for the licenses of regulated substances and enforcement matters. Mr. Speaker, I am convinced that this bill before us will impact our country. I am certain that the purpose, Mr. Speaker, is to provide St. Lucians a level of certainty that an adequate mechanism is being created to ensure that people will be safe, that our people will have avenue to benefit from modern advances and opportunities, that our society and economy will benefit from a robust regulatory structure. Mr. Speaker, since the manifesto promise of the St. Lucia Labour Party, we have shown an intent not only to remove the archaic and draconian criminal provisions concerning cannabis, but to establish a legal framework allowing for the cultivation, sale, and use of cannabis in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, what we, like many others in the public, initially perceived as a rather simple undertaking has been a thought-provoking and arduous problem-solving mission, necessitating that we be cautious and meticulous, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we initially believed that a single cannabis bill and cannabis authority would provide a suitable legal and regulatory framework for this industry. However, with time, review, technical advice, introspection, we have decided that broader change was necessary at this pivotal time in our development. We had to broaden our outlook, broaden our scope, broaden our approach. Cannabis was not the only substance which required a revised regulatory framework. And therefore, it was prudent for our development not to regulate, grow, and structure cannabis in silos. Hence, the justification for the Regulatory Substance Authority and for the bill that is before us. Mr. Speaker, the enactment of that legislation spells not only another pivotal achievement in the process of cannabis reform, but will address the need for the creation of a regulatory authority which will bring other regimes and products into a space of regulatory conformity. Mr. Speaker, the Regulatory Substances Bill creates and provides the legal parameters for a statutory body which will bear that name and will be charged with the regulations and oversight of several regulatory substances, including cannabis and cannabis products. Mr. Speaker, Part 1 of the Regulatory Substance Bill establishes the authority and a board which shall oversee the affairs of the authority. Part 2 of the bill provides for the requirement for license, processes for application, parameters for approval, and other similar matters, while Part 3 of the bill establishes a tribunal allowing for persons aggrieved to seek review and redress. A Regulatory Substances Fund is created in Part 4 of the bill. This fund is established with the oversight of a separate board, ensuring the funds generated by the authority and the substances which it regulates will be used as specified in Clause 77 of the bill. As specified in that clause, Mr. Speaker, the purpose of the fund is to facilitate the operations of the Regulated Substances Authority and for specific matters relating to regulated substances or other matters. Mr. Speaker, we anticipate that the funds generated by the Regulated Substances Authority will finance its operation within the first 3 years of establishment. And as a result, Mr. Speaker, beyond this initial startup period, the authority should be self-sufficient. The funds generated, Mr. Speaker, will also be used to perform critical functions under Section 6 relating to regulated substances, and that includes 1, review of policies and guidelines, 2, specific scientific research and development, 3, development and implementation in collaboration with ministries, departments, or agencies. A, comprehensive public education and training programs to raise public awareness, especially for high-risk groups. Mr. Speaker, this is extremely important for us, especially for our youth and for students, as we move towards a cannabis industry. We definitely need public awareness to ensure that we ring-fence that cannabis from our school children and our young people. Also, in this section, we provide for social, emotional, and mental support programs for persons dealing with a regulated substance. And thirdly, we focus on procedures for the safe storage and disposal of regulated substances, to name a few. The objective, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that the revenue derived from the regulated industry will be applied to the benefit of these industries. By way of example, funds raised from cannabis should be used and benefit that aspect of the industry. Part 5 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, speak to the enforcement of the provision of this bill and duly empowers authorized persons to ensure that provision of the bill are being adhered to. While Part 6 of the bill speaks to confidentiality and oath of secrecy, Mr. Speaker, and that is included in Section 90. Mr. Speaker, I made mention of regulated substances, but so far have only spoken about cannabis. Clause 4 of the bill allows the minister, by order published in the Gazette, to declare a substance to be a regulated substance, thereby placing it and its regulations within the remit of the authority. Mr. Speaker, as I speak, the Office of the Attorney General's Chambers is at an advanced stage in the development of legislation for 2 substances which we expect the Regulated Substances Authority to regulate and assume responsibility for in the very near future. The cannabis bill, Mr. Speaker, is expected to be presented before this Honorable House within the coming months. Mr. Speaker, the draft of the cannabis bill, like this regulatory substance bill, have received widespread stakeholder discussion, and this will continue even after the passage of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I want to pause a moment and to present to this Honorable House some of the stakeholders and individuals that have assisted in the development of the regulatory substance bill, as well as working on the cannabis bill. And I want to recognize 2 of those persons sitting in the gallery today, and that is Mr. English, who's the legal officer in the Ministry of Commerce, and my dear friend Pancho. And Mr. Speaker, these 2 gentlemen have worked among others.
Minister, could you mention the second name? I think it was drowned out by the applause.
Say that?
Second name for the record. For the record.
Oh, the second one was this. Mr. Andre Dicaris, alias Pancho. Alias Pancho. I think the whole world knows him as Pancho. But Mr. Speaker, it's for the records, I would like to mention all the persons that have brought us where we are thus far. And we have the Cannabis Commission under the auspices of Invest St. Lucia, and there we have special mention of Ms. Menisha Thomas and Mr. Michael Gordon, King's Counsel. Within the Ministry of Health, we have the CMO, the Chief Drug Inspector, and Director and Deputy Director of the Substance Abuse Secretariat. We have members of the Medical and Dental Association. We have the Ministry of Agriculture and the staff of the National Agriculture Diagnostic Lab. And we also have the National Forensic Lab. We have the Director and staff of the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, the Ministry of External Affairs, the Ministry of Justice. Special mention to the staff of the Legislative Drafting Units, the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, the Ministry of Tourism, the St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Authority, Event St. Lucia, the Ministry of Finance, the Bankers Association, the individual banks, the Cannabis Task Force, comprising representatives of the Ayanola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari, the Inland Revenue Department, Invest St. Lucia, Bureau of Standards, the Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Cannabis Movement of St. Lucia, and the Recording Secretary, Ms. Renata D'Souza. We have the Transnational Institution, the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, the government of Canada, the CARICOM Secretariat, the Canada Expert Deployment Mechanism, and I want to recognize the consultant, Mrs. Trombetti, as well as our local consultant, Mr. Felix Finister. Other consultants, Ms. Heather Azizi and Mrs. Lydia Ephraim. All other interesting persons who have taken part in the various stakeholder discussions that we've had. And Mr. Speaker, the staff of the Ministry of Commerce, Ms. Rosemary Pierre-Louis, who has just left us, and I want to recognize the work that was done by the Honorable Member for Suazela Saltibus when he was the Minister. On this side, we do what we have to do properly. Also, Ms. Tricia Sipal Edward, Mr. Paul Francis, the Permanent Secretary, Sophia Alfie Henry, I've mentioned Pancho, Mr. Inglis, and others. So, Mr. Speaker, this whole list, the Attorney General, looking at it back there, and the staff of the AG's office. Mr. Speaker, the list would give one an indication of the number of hours in deliberating to try to bring this industry together. Mr. Speaker, nuclear and radiation sources form the subject of another bill under development, which will similarly be presented before this Honorable House in the coming months. That bill, Mr. Speaker, currently being referred to as the Radiation Safety and Security of Radioactive Sources Bill, will address our international obligations to regulate and protect St. Lucia against the threats and risks associated with nuclear material and radioactive sources. Mr. Speaker, there is also an intention to revise the current legislative regime for alcohol, petroleum, and other toxic chemicals. All of these substances suffer from the archaic and inadequate regulatory framework, which this administration recognizes a need to address. As such, Mr. Speaker, committees respective to each substance have begun the process of review of these industries to ensure the development of modern laws which the Regulated Substances Authority is expected to oversee. Mr. Speaker, this government fully intends to continue to engage relevant stakeholders and the general public in the development of the legislation of all the substances which will be regulated by this authority. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia's attempt at regulation in this context is different. But different, Mr. Speaker, not always be seen as negative. As servants of the people, the Regulatory Substance Authority and framework developed is, to our mind, part of an informed, robust, modern, and bespoke approach to legislation. Mr. Speaker, as I indicated in September, our work is far from complete, but our energy, determination, and passion to till what we believe is fertile soil will not fail and will yield much fruit in due season. We remain resolute in our promise to develop not just a robust cannabis industry, but a broader mechanism for regulating substances in our fair Helen. Mr. Speaker, I present this bill for the consideration and approval of this Honorable House. Thank you.
Honorable members, the question is that the regulated substance bill be read a second time. Member for Castries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Judy to where we are at this point started a long time ago. Mr. Speaker, I just want to pay tribute and to, as I've done before, to pay tribute to the young men and some women who were prosecuted and jailed for the use of small quantities of cannabis. There are a number of young men I meet in my constituency, and they say to me they have police records because they were caught with a stick of marijuana. Some others were jailed, etc. I think in paying tribute to all the pioneers, including Mr. DeCaris and the attorney and these other people, I think we should remember them and also pay some tribute to them for what they went through during that time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the journey to where we are today, and I know the member for Choiseul will one day try to chastise me when I stood in this honorable house and I decided and I told this honorable house that we were introducing legislation to decriminalize marijuana and also to expunge some of the records of people who had convictions for small quantities of marijuana. I saw him very incensed, and he said I was not given credit to the credit was due, Mr. Speaker. But he started that work. Mr. Speaker. But you know, there were reasons why he couldn't follow it through, Mr. Speaker. Because what we were doing, we needed to have courage. Because it really is something that people don't understand, Mr. Speaker. There's a particular pastor in a church, I won't mention the church, who a friend of mine said to him that he wants to pray for me because I had introduced young people to smoking marijuana and cannabis. So there are a lot of people who still have that belief. So when we took that position, there wasn't a position to allow people to wantonly smoke in public, etc. Because I always say to the guys that smoking in public is still an offense. Smoking marijuana in public is still an offense, etc. But I just want to urge to calm the expectations that are rising out of this cannabis situation. There are some people who believe that the expectations and the country's economy will change overnight, and that is the way to go. It's a way to diversify the resources of the country, but it's not a magic one. It will not overnight create economic growth and economic development. It will help, it will assist, structured, organized, and I speak to my colleagues who in the countries, they have gone that way, and it's taking time. It's taking a lot of time. The returns take time, Mr. Speaker. But there is one thing that we must deal with, and it is something that really irks me as Prime Minister. The double standards that exist as far as cannabis is concerned, and as far as many other things are concerned, including economic policy. Up to now, proceeds from the sale of cannabis cannot go through the normal banking system. Up to today, you can't go for the SWIFT, etc. You can't go to the system. They call it illegal. They say it's money laundering, etc. Up to today. But in cities, in some of the major countries, there are cannabis cafes. There are people go in and smoke and sell and trade and put the money in the same bank that they say we can't pass our money through if we sell it. It's a kind of hypocrisy that really irks me. And then, you know, it's in several other aspects of life. In sugarcane, in bananas, in tourism, in financial services, in the Citizens by Investment Program. any economic venture that we seem to be going into that may cause us to have genuine independence, there is some pullback. There is a pushback. And sometimes you wonder, really, is a motive development or is the motive control? And several things, and I would not like to go into it at this moment, but there are several things, and that is why it's necessary that the people of the country get adequately educated so they can defend and they can protect their country when these attacks come and when these situations arise. Apart from the politics, the red and yellow politics, there are several things that we need to stand up as a nation and fight for. We need to stand up as a nation and defend and protect, Mr. Speaker, because these islands are falling prey to circumstances that may lead us to a place where we do not want to go, Mr. Speaker. We speak about climate change, and next week we're going to COP. The developed world made a pledge years ago to help these islands in terms of their adaptation, Mr. Speaker. Years ago they made these pledges. Up to today, not a cent. Not up to today, not a cent. They have not made these pledges. And the hurricanes and natural disasters affect us more than anything else. Up to today, Mr. Speaker, the adaptation pledges that they made to keep the temperature at the temperature increase to less than 1.5 degrees centigrade, they have not met these pledges, Mr. Speaker. But all kinds of control, all kinds of it, and the sad thing to do is some of our own professionals get carried away, and instead of defending, they promote. Some of our own people, instead of defending, and that is where sometimes I question a few things. We have not developed an alternative economic policy to deal with some of the issues that we have to deal with. And that is because we have remained divided. We have not. Look at our region, starting from Cuba, Venezuela, Jamaica, Guyana, the wealth of resources that exists in that region. You can imagine if that region had a serious economic integration that would cause us to deal with our own development, how we would be, where we would be, Mr. Speaker. But these are things that you have to think of. But the reality is every day we are faced with high unemployment, we are faced with climate change, things that we have no control over, but we have to deal with it. Every morning I get up, I look at the weather forecast, because these days there's no seasons, hurricane season. Every day the rain falls in the morning, the sun is bright, it's burning you. Climate change, real. Then they talk about high indebtedness. All the debts, most of the debts we have incurred is because we have to rebuild after a natural disaster. Most of the debts that we have incurred. So it's called high indebtedness. And with that high indebtedness, you must cut back on social policy. So Mr. Speaker, it is really a situation where sometimes you feel like going round and round and round, Mr. Speaker. Then you speak about implementation, rate of implementation. Then rate of implementation, you have procurement policies. How can you increase the rate of implementation if your procurement policies are so tied by circumstances that are beyond us? But you have to follow these procurement policies. So Mr. Speaker, this bill is a step in the right direction, but I'm not sure whether the powers that be, and I'm not speaking about the local powers, the powers that be will allow us to have the benefits, the full benefits of a cannabis industry. I'm not sure. It concerns me, Mr. Speaker, because I see barriers set up in everything we do. In tourism, you have, what do you call it? In tourism, the barriers in tourism. When they criminalize when they see that you can't visit us again because of travel advisories. In tourism, you have travel advisories. You know, anytime in financial services, you have blacklisting. in CIP, you have concerns about the Schengen visa. So, Mr. Speaker, it just then in banking, you have de-risking, and the administration is very clear. The fear of de-risking. Banks are afraid to take action because they are afraid of de-risking. And de-risking means that your credit card becomes useless. Somebody said it was your patrimony, but it becomes useless. You will not be able to use it, Mr. Speaker. And there are some islands already where the government had to put money in a helicopter and carry it to Miami, to the U.S. to send, because the country, the de-risking, there was de-risking. These are things that the people of the country must be told about. The risk and the pressure of being small, the pressure of being underdeveloped, and the pressure of being another thing which I will not say. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the minister, I support the pioneers, but I just want to temper expectations that is the cure or for St. Lucia's economic problems. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Suzel Saltibus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will not be lengthy at all in my presentation. Mr. Speaker, did I hear the Prime Minister indicate that I did not have the testicular fortitude to promote? Did you say that? Required. Okay. Because, you know, one of the things I continuously said, you know, Mr. Speaker, leading up to the last elections, in fact, I remember hearing an elder from the Rastafari Association saying that even if you pass the cannabis legislation, we shall not be fooled, you know. And I always said, Mr. Speaker, I will never do anything, you know, which I believe people give people the impression that I'm doing it as to get votes. So I just wanted to get that very clear, Mr. Speaker. As the member for... I have a lot of that. Mr. Speaker, as the member for Soufrière, Francis Jacques said, I really want to commend particularly Mr. Inglis and Pancho. In fact, way before we even started that discussion, I'm sure you'd recall Pancho and Bin were on various talk shows trying to promote the cultivation of hemp and other things they felt that could have done very good things for our country and our economy, you know. But, you know, the various perceptions by people in society, you know, they continuously were kept grounded, should I say. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that we have come this far. You know, I have friends who would always tell me that the Bible speaks about, you know, that God created everything, every living thing on the earth with seeds and the green plant and everything. And so this is not something that they should be fighting to be made legal. I have one concern with the Act, Minister, and it's particularly agreeing with the Prime Minister with some of the challenges that various people have had to undergo in the past. And we know, you know, everybody gives something a bad name, but they were very genuine people who spiritually use cannabis, you know, for the right reasons, for meditating and everything like that. And we always say that when we go forward, they must have their rightful place. So I was a little concerned in terms of the appointment of the board, that I noticed you have 7 members, but no direct individual coming from the Ionola Council of Rastafari, considering all of what Sorry? No, wait. Seven. Yeah, 22. The permanent secretary in the ministry, the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance, and the director of the bureau, representative of civil society, and 3 persons with expertise in business, medicine, science, or research. When I think of all what that grouping had to deal with, I think they should have a rightful place on the board, on the authority, in making decisions on the way forward, which to give them the rightful position. And I just thought I should put that out there. We can come back and address it at a little, but I felt, that I know we have a very general listing of which they can be chosen from, but I thought it should be very specific in terms of their appointment. So I just wanted to put that on the table. Sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Member Vasufa, you beginning to contribute, you closing or you?
No.
Because you can address it in your rebuttal. But you. The member for Library? I guess that's the real thing to fly high.
You see, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me leave to make a very brief intervention. But before I proceed, I just want to tell the honorable member for Choiseul Saltibus that we in Library, we will always fly high, compatriot, because we are no longer in the age where people used to travel from St. Lucia to the UK by a boat, and they used to marvel at the sky and say the sky is the limit. For us in the People's Republic of Library, we are in the aviation age. Aeroplanes are always in the sky, and the sky is simply the beginning for us. So be guided accordingly. But as I enter the debate on the bill, Mr. Speaker, I cannot help but remembering the times of Al Capone, when alcohol was not legal and there was trade in alcohol, and it was similar to most substances that were not legal. And out of all the chaos and the bloodshed came order because of regulation. I know that we have just set in motion this bill. It will not be perfect, but of course, we can always emerge with another version to make it less susceptible to objection. And so it's always going to be a work in progress until we get it right. Mr. Speaker, I just wish, as I indicated, to make a very brief contribution to the Regulated Substances Bill, which is before this Honorable House. It shows, Mr. Speaker, that the government is delivering on its mandate as articulated in our manifesto for 2021, putting you first. Mr. Speaker, the manifesto states, and I wish to quote, "In dialogue and consultation with health officials and advocates for marijuana legalization, we shall develop a medicinal and recreational cannabis industry. We shall undertake to do the following. 1, provide the necessary resources to create and maintain a sustainable and vibrant market for cannabis, both regionally and internationally. Expunge the records of crimes relating to the possession of small quantities of cannabis. Decriminalize the use of marijuana to be followed by its eventual legalization." A process. Following up on this, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance in his budget policy statement for fiscal year 2022-2023 stated the following, and I quote, "Mr. Speaker, my government promised in its manifesto to 1, expunge the record of crimes relating to the possession of small quantities of cannabis. 2, decriminalize the use of marijuana to be followed by its eventual legalization. 3, provide the necessary resources to create and maintain a sustainable and vibrant market for cannabis regionally and internationally. And 4, allow cultivation of 4 plants of marijuana for personal and private use. Unquote. Mr. Speaker, continue. We have to a large extent delivered promises 1 and 2, Mr. Speaker. I have already apologized to the Rastafarian community for the historical atrocities meted out to them for the consumption and religious use of cannabis, as during Nyabingi. Mr. Speaker, these injustices will be reversed when the appropriate structure is set up for the commercialization of marijuana. Mr. Speaker, the government has formed a stakeholder committee that comprises representatives of the police, members of the Rastafarian community, and advocates for legalization and other sectoral interests to develop an appropriate legislative framework for cannabis commercialization. Unquote. Continued. Mr. Speaker, we do not intend to reinvent the wheel and will be learning from our fellow neighboring countries which have commercial cannabis for export. Mr. Speaker, we expect within a reasonable time to export like our neighboring islands. Mr. Speaker, I wish to place on record our deep appreciation to the Honorable Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs, who has been responsible for championing this important public policy, as I know that this is a matter that was extremely difficult to navigate, Mr. Speaker, given the strong views on the matter of regulated substances. Our government is never shy of dealing with the difficult issues. We always ensure that we do so in a fair and balanced manner, and one that reflects the public interest. Mr. Speaker, since coming into office, the Prime Minister has championed the cause of ensuring that the difficult issues, the turbulent pockets that we have to navigate, are dealt with very early in a very serious and focused fashion. He does not have a manifesto simply for nice, colorful things, but of course as a blueprint, as broad policy recommendations that whilst in government would be able to be distilled into specific policy recommendations to instigate concrete responses within the decision-making bodies of government. And this is exactly what is happening today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have a team that delivers, and we need to commend the Honorable Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs, and the member for Supreme Consider. She must be commended. Knowing her beliefs, Mr. Speaker, that she is objective and strong. I know the way she behaves in the cabinet, Mr. Speaker. And she's a no-nonsense minister and member of parliament for her constituency. Mr. Speaker, the stakeholder committee should also be commended for their input and contributions on this matter. You know, and it's interesting that Mr. Decay is present in the chamber whilst we are deliberating on this very important issue. When it was not fashionable for people to call on talk shows and talk about marijuana, he did it. He was not convinced by the many developed countries that say, look, this is a crime and you are going to be crucified. He always called. You know, and I remember somebody saying, Decay say, I've been smoking for 30 years and nothing has happened to me, and they tried to make fun out of it. But I always took him seriously as a serious and sober advocate. And today I'm sure that he's pleased to see that his years of advocacy has come to the parliament in the form of at least an attempt, you know, to ensure we establish order in this particular aspect of things. Mr. Speaker, the global market for cannabis was valued at US $43.72 billion. It is therefore a lucrative and growing market which St. Lucia can benefit from in terms of exports. The global cannabis market size is projected to grow substantially from 57.18 billion in 2023 to 444.34 billion by 2030, at a compound annual growth rate of 34.03% during the forecast period. This momentum is driven primarily by the increasing recognition that the product may have a range of medicinal benefits. It is also to be noted that the cannabis industry has been growing significantly in the United States of America. The Regulated Substance Bill is comprehensive in scope and breadth in terms of ensuring that a proper and sound regulatory framework is established for regulated substances. As indicated in the explanatory notes, Mr. Speaker, the purpose of the bill is to establish the Regulated Substances Authority, Regulated Substances Tribunal, Regulated Substances Fund, and to provide for the licensing of regulated substances. The bill, Mr. Speaker, provides for the establishment of a Regulated Substance Authority, a statutory authority. The statutory body is to be managed by a board of directors, which is the governing body for the Regulated Substances Authority, and to exercise and perform the functions conferred upon the Act. That's progressive and liberating, Mr. Speaker. The functions of the authority are outlined in Section 6 of the bill, and the powers of the authority are contained in Section 7 of the bill. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the minister's public policy function, the minister is responsible for declaring a substance to be a regulated substance. That's Section 4 of the bill. This has to be done by order and published in the St. Lucia Gazette. Section 20 of the bill gives the power to the minister, on the recommendation of cabinet and upon consultation with the chairperson of the authority, to give written directives to the authority as the minister considers necessary in the public interest. Always keeping the door wide open for consultation and for there to be an exchange of views predicated upon the cross-fertilization of ideas, Mr. Speaker. Part 2 of the bill deals with licensing matters pertaining to regulated substances and deal with inter alia licensing requirements, application for a license, approval of an application for a license, types and class of license, conditions of license, renewal of license, revocation of a license, and many other matters pertaining to the licensing requirements. Part 3 of the bill provides for the establishment of a tribunal whose functions include the review of an appeal of a decision made by the Regulated Substances Authority and a dispute regarding regulated substances. And as I prepare to close, I go to Part 4 of the bill, establishes a Regulated Substances Fund, which is a special fund established in accordance with Section 22 of the Public Finance Management Act. So this is not in isolation to our efforts at fiscal sanity in this country and to ensure that things are tied in a way that is focused and we are moving along a particular path of convergence. So, Mr. Speaker, the purpose of this fund is to facilitate the operations of the Regulated Substance Authority. The fund of the Regulated Substance Authority is to be governed by a Regulatory Substances Fund Board, whose composition is as follows. And I think a few moments ago, the Honorable Member for Choiseul Saltibas did speak to a few of them, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry, who's the Chairperson, the Director of Finance, the Chief Executive Officer, representative of the private sector, a person with expertise in finance, economics, or other related field. Part 4 of the bill deals with enforcement, Mr. Speaker. This part of the bill provides for the inspection and monitoring of premises of licensed owners or premises. This part also provides for seizure of regulated substances in cases where a police officer has reasonable grounds to believe that an offense is committed. So overall, Mr. Speaker, as I close, I am of the view that the Regulated Substances Bill is comprehensive and provides for all of the relevant checks and balances that are required for regulated substances and to help develop a successful, viable, regulated substances industry. Mr. Speaker, I now yield the floor.
Minister for Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move yes, but before that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, during the presentation, the member for Swazel Saltibus raised the issue that he is of the opinion that we should consider placing a member of the Rastafarian movement on the board of the Regulatory Substance Authority. But Mr. Speaker, maybe what I need to bring to the members' attention that would be more appropriate when we deal with the cannabis bill itself, because we believe when you look at the objective of the authority, we believe that when you look at section 22, that we have on 22 CD, we said a representative of civil society. Especially when you're looking at the objective of this bill, we believe that it might be prudent not to put a member of the Rastafarian movement on this authority bill. We believe that it is more appropriate to let them be represented on the cannabis section, Mr. Speaker. That's my humble view on that particular thing. But I'm open to the opinion of this honorable house. Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, the work of the committee and the ministry continues as we try to bring this cannabis industry to life. The Regulatory Substances Bill is, as I believe, another move to establish a proper ecosystem for the cannabis industry and for other regulated substances. Again, I am pleased that we are doing this within Business Month, Mr. Speaker. It was not planned, but everything is coming back to this month of November. This is Business Month. And what we are doing there now as it relates to the cannabis industry is part of our business development. And just before that, the conversation we are having, the adjustment to the St. Lucia, Invest St. Lucia bill, all of it is saying that we are coming to age within the month of November. What I need to, Mr. Speaker, want to present here to this honorable house is to give all the assurance that the public conversation and stakeholder discussion continues. I think more than anything else, the public education in our schools, our police officers, with the Rastafarian community itself in terms of their role and how they benefit from that industry is something that we must do in a more aggressive way. And I'm giving this honorable members here a commitment that the next phase is for this. I want to also report that our legal officer and I will be traveling out next week to one of the workshops, again, a cannabis workshop, to try to learn all we can so that we can put the finishing touches on the cannabis bill itself. So, Mr. Speaker, I present this bill to this House, and I want to thank members for their patience and for bringing it together. I thank you.
Honorable members, the question is that the Regulated Substances Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to establish the Regulated Substances Authority, Regulated Substances Tribunal, Regulated Substances Fund to provide for the licensing of regulated substances and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 3.
Act binds the Crown.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 1, clauses 4 to 40.
Regulated Substances Authority.
Mr. Speaker, we want to have one.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, we have one amendment. We want to include under item 6.
What?
Clause 6.
Clause 6.
And I think that's on page 12.
Yes.
Yes? We want to include a new Q. And then the current Q will be R and the R will be S. So the new Q. To conduct research, develop policies.
Start again.
To conduct research, develop policies.
I'm writing. To conduct research,
develop policies, and have stakeholder consultations on substances.
Just a minute, Minister. After consultations?
On substances as the board directs.
That's the only one? Member for Suzel, you... Mike.
Mr. Chair, I understand that the minister may want to revert to her advisory team on this, because I understand her proposal with regards to a subset of the authority. But when I look, for example, the powers of the authority and the functions of the authority, I believe having a member of that group that I suggested is even more important to represent that genuine group of people who've been exploited, who've been victimized and everything else. And I do believe, would welcome an amendment maybe at a later date soon, because I do believe they have a legitimate, reason to, because there's something that I remember in early discussions, and Pancho would remember as well. One of the things that the Rastafarian community always said was, based on all what they have been through, maybe various exceptions should be made for them, particularly in maybe paying license fees and this kind of thing. So I don't want to broaden that conversation now, but I just think, somebody to represent them on that is important. But I revert to the time to discuss it with your committee. Yes.
It is proposed that Clause 4, Clause 6, 1Q be deleted. No, the current Q deleted. Oh, okay. So the current Q becomes R, and a new Q to conduct research, develop policies, and have stakeholder consultation on substances as the board directs. And the current R becomes S. Clause, Part 1, clauses 4 to 40, as amended, stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 2, clauses 41 to 63.
License for regulated substances.
Part 2, clauses 41 to 63, stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 3, clauses 64 to 75.
Regulated Substances Tribunal.
Part 3, clauses 64 to 75, stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 4, clauses 76 to 83.
Regulated Substances Fund.
Part 4, clauses 76 to 83, stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 5, clauses 84 to 89.
Enforcement.
Part 5, clauses 84 to 89, stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 6, clauses 90 to 93.
Miscellaneous.
Part 6, clauses 90 to 93, stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Honorable members, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put a question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, I beg to report that the Regulated Substances Bill went through committee stage with amendments to Clause 6. Minister for Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Honorable members, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Regulated Substances Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Regulated Substances Act 2023.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this House stands adjourned.
Before I pose the question, I want to go back to the Prime Minister's testicular fortitude. Testicular fortitude. When I was presiding in another place, in effect at least 8 years ago, I invited Mr. DeCaris to give testimony before a Senate subcommittee on marijuana. Either he thought I didn't have the testicular fortitude, or he himself believed he didn't. He never accepted my invitation. Honorable members, the question is that this House do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
All rise.
Welcome back. We have come to the conclusion of today's sitting of Parliament, Friday, November 4th. The session resumed at 2:45 this afternoon, and principally some bills were passed. The Code of Civil Procedure, it was done for first reading, went through all its stages and passed. An Invest St. Lucia Amendment Bill was passed. This had principally to do with ironing out the portfolio or responsibilities between the Ministry of Commerce and Invest St. Lucia, since both entities, the ministry and the organization, are principally responsible for investment. Responsible for investment in the land, and the ministers wanted some kind of continuity, or to just iron out the different responsibilities. The climate change bill was deferred. There was a civil aviation bill that was done for first reading. It went through all its stages and passed. This principally had to do with bringing some regulations in place to meet international demands, and the minister with responsibility for aviation, he did mention this was a harmonized legislation among all the islands in the Eastern Caribbean, and the one which generated a lot of debate, Michael. It was also done for first reading, but went through all its stages and passed, was the regulated substances, and maybe you could take it from there.
Oui, merci un peu, Virgil. Ça qui fait aujourd'hui, nous avons venu au bout de la session qui constitue. Vous savez, il a commencé à mardi, mais il n'est pas fini avec le métier pour aujourd'hui, pour finir toute discussion. Ça, comme Virgil dit non, ça nous a discuté aujourd'hui, c'est. Nous parler à ce point de vue, c'était un loan que le gouvernement a point pour aider cette situation de l'eau en mi-coup. Avec ça, c'est l'argent en valeur $1,203,000. Oui, après ça, $1,203,000 américains pour mener de l'eau en wet, ça, mi-coup, ça c'est mot pour la ressource avec ces différentes places-là. C'est pas la ressource, c'est la patience avec ces places-là, excusez-moi. Aussi, j'ai discuté aujourd'hui, Invest St. Lucia, ça c'est côté ministère qui a fait un amendement en loi pour ranger ma composition, et bien, manière de ranger entre ministres là, ça c'est ministre en bas du ministère.
Commerce.
Ministère Commerce et puis ministère ça c'est Onesile qui nous aide à regarder qui manière ça a mangé. Et qu'on dit aussi le tenir c'est ça qui n'était pas pour passer au dia, mais c'est année passée, mais pour ça discuter dans l'autre session quand ça c'est affaires changement climat avec ce qu'on dit aussi la tenir l'autre loi un changement amendement qui a associé à faire plein avec ça qui est nécessaire pour voyager et ça partit en chaque discussion, mais c'est comme naturel avec loi qui est internationale avec pour ça suivre. Et dernièrement loi avec Jordan, c'est un jour historique, et bien un jour l'histoire faite en simplicité côté gouvernement passé loi pour régler différents bagailles qu'on marijuana avec bagaille comme ça mais ça c'est un commencement avec ça s'est passé par honorable Hippolyte avec un monde qui qui a poussé, ils ont fait ça, monsieur Dicaris, et puis un autre monsieur qui était là aussi pour ici pour go loi ça là qui passait aujourd'hui avec ça extra mener nous au bout de session qui consiste aujourd'hui.
Yes, today's sitting was even keel. It was more tempered than what we saw on Tuesday. We thank you all for joining us here at the National Television Network. I am Virgil Leonti.
Michael Gaspar, nous avons merci un peu pour rester pour nous, avec nous avons vu maintenant en studio nous, et avant nous aller, nous pour dire merci un peu, merci Virgil, merci tous ces gens qui aident pour faire présentation ça là, oui enfin ça qui a passé.
Merci
tout
Miguel.
Miguel avec les autres agents du Parlement, mais nous merci pour tout le monde, avec nous avons surtout un bon finissement de semaine avec un bon temps. Merci Dédé.